Let's get another view from Ukraine with the people who are enduring this invasion. It's a nation of about 43 million people living through some terrifying times. Many of them woke up to the aftermath of overnight attacks before hearing more missiles and explosions. To our knowledge, Ukraine has seen more than a dozen confirmed attacks, including in big cities like Kyiv and Kharkiv, as you can see here on our map. President Zelensky said 137 soldiers were killed today. Over 300 were injured. Those numbers are updated just as of a few minutes before we came on the air. Many people around the country have either lost their homes or are abandoning them. Huge traffic jams are slowing them down from entering Poland to the west or escaping to other Ukrainian cities. But not everyone is leaving. Quite a few are trying to keep their cities up and running and taking shelter and staying put. Some folks took refuge in the subway stations. Many are also stocking up on food. Long lines and confusion have been common at some grocery stores, and having cash on hand could become vital very soon. ATMs had long lines of people waiting to withdraw money. Joining us now from Kyiv is Terrell Jermaine Starr, Senior Non-Resident Fellow at the Eurasia Center with the Atlantic Council and the host of the podcast Black Diplomats. Mr. Starr, welcome back to the program. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
You shared a video on Twitter of people waiting in a long line for gas. Let's take a quick look at that first.
This is a long line. Starts here, the queue going for gas. The queue for gas.
How are folks doing where you are right now?
We're alive. I know that sounds fatalistic, but that's just the reality of our situation right now. This country has undergone massive airstrikes. The fact that civilian areas where I live, quite frankly, that haven't been hit is a bit of a miracle. It's very stressful here. I know my Ukrainian colleagues who are journalists are extremely stressed out. We don't know where it is to be safe. We feel very blessed, very fortunate. We survived this barrage today. Tomorrow could be a completely different story. People are very exhausted. But there's not chaos here. I have to say that. And given these circumstances, you would think that there would be chaos here, but it hasn't been. It's relatively quiet despite all the things that are happening. So we are in, even though people are nervous, they're anxious, a little bit, very much afraid. There's not chaos here, and there's a resiliency in this country that is very commendable.
What's gone into folks' decisions about whether to stay or whether to go? I guess other than people like yourself who are working as journalists or who've kind of decided to stay to bear witness to what's happening, for everyday people, how are they deciding whether to stay or to go?
It depends. One, do you have the resources to go? I mean, being able to leave the country, making sure that you have the proper documents to go, going someplace and being able to pay for housing. Everybody doesn't have the luxury of doing that. I know there are some people, I'm staying with a friend right now. He sent his kids out of the country and he's staying here because he feels like he needs to defend his country. It's very terrifying to me. It's very scary to me. I have friends who are saying that they are going into the Ukrainian military to fight. And that means that you have to face down the Russian military and face down death. I mean, I literally have friends who are going to risk their lives against, to fight a war that's senseless and doesn't make sense. And it's very hard for me to even articulate this to you, but this is what war is. I have friends who are very much impacted by this. That plays a role into why they're staying. Another reason is, again, it's the resilience. People don't feel like they should be forced out of their home. Like I told you in previous previous shows, people died to defend their democracy here, and they don't want to feel like they're just being pushed out of their land because Putin wants to be a bully.
We asked our followers online what's resonating the most with them about what's happening in Ukraine. Justin wrote, "I've been thinking a lot about my uncle. a Ukrainian immigrant who escaped the USSR's horrors. His national pride was always strong, but never more evident than when Ukraine declared its independence. His heart would be breaking today. Terrell, I imagine that that's part of what's underpinning some of this, is that Ukraine has a long history of dealing with Soviet power, from the end of World War I, through Lenin, through Stalin, the Holodomor, which was a mass famine that killed millions of people. It seems like the roots of this resilience and this determination run extremely deep. And I'm guessing that's what is part of what makes this so scary, is because the country kind of has a history of pushing back against this kind of aggression.
Yes, and it goes deeper than what you said. You brought up a lot of great historical points. It goes back to the Tsarist period, right? You know, we can't forget about that. It goes back to Catherine the Great. It goes back to this country having their land taken away from them even during the 1700s. And so, you know, one of the things I want to touch on is back, you know, with the USSR in 1991. The Russian government and the Duma, they never wanted to recognize Ukraine as an independent nation. So what we're seeing right now is more than 30 years in the making. I did an episode on my podcast, Black Diplomats, where I featured two Ukrainians, including one military journalist that's out in the field right now with the Ukrainian military, where they all talked about the 30-year anniversary or celebration of the fall of the Soviet Union, where they said basically that they're still fighting for their independence to this day because Putin refuses to recognize not only Ukraine as a sovereign nation, but Ukrainians that are independent of, you know, and having their own agency, when he was recognizing the Donbass and Luhansk regions.
Right.
In his language, I mean, the way that he talked about Ukrainians is the way that racist white people talk about Black people in the United States. He actually, and when he says that we're coming to Ukraine to denazify these people, it's basically a dog whistle, and basically, you know, it's the equivalent of calling Black people the N-word. I know that sounds like a stretch, but it isn't. Ukraine is Putin's Chicago. You know how people want to stereotype Chicago when they talk about crime, when they talk about, you know, bad activity that are happening in the cities, and it needs to be shut down and it needs to be over policed. It's the same narrative that Putin is making about Ukraine: lies, lack of context, a lack of history, a lack of acknowledging of structural discrimination, and Ukraine is a victim of this revisionism of these lies. And so so Ukraine technically has been independent, but as far as Russia is concerned, it never should have been, and that has been the attitude of the Kremlin, which predates Putin.
I know we're running a little bit over, but I have to ask one more quick thing. I don't mean to make this too personal, but you said you had friends who have gone off to fight to try to defend Ukraine. Have they and have you made peace with the possibility that they won't make it back?
Yeah. It's I thank you for asking me that, because I want people to really appreciate how much this is not a game. Yeah, it terrifies me. It scares me, and I was afraid for myself, and I was afraid for my friends. I was ashamed to say it at first because this is my first time covering a war. I'm not ashamed of it anymore. I mean, I'm become more resilient, but yeah, it terrifies me, and it just really shows. The bottom line is that this is a senseless war, and Putin has attacked this country for absolutely nothing. My friends are signing up to fight and are risking their lives for nothing. That's what people need to know. This war is unwarranted. It never should have happened. Putin had no intention of negotiating a good faith. And I have friends who are out there who are risking their lives, and it's all for nothing, absolutely nothing.
Terrell Jermaine Starr, I'm sorry to pull the scab off a wound for you, but I really appreciate you being willing to talk about this and being honest about that. And I thank you for making time for us, sir. Thank you very much.
Anytime, I'll always be here.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.